Hi, everybody. This is Evelyn Gansglass. I'm interim Crow lead of Peace Corps Community for Refugees, together with Ann Baker, who's on this call. And today we have our good friend Dan Costin, who is Assistant Vice President for Policy and Advocacy at the National Immigration Forum, who's going to give us an update on all the developments, continuing developments in the whole immigration policy arena. As we said at the beginning, if you have any particular questions, put them in the chat. But since it's such a small group, we can also do, maybe you can just raise your hands as well as Dan is making his presentation, and we can do it a little more informally. So with that, I should also say that Dan is a returned Peace Corps volunteer, as the rest of us, and he served in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is also not having a great time at the moment. So many problems in the world. So with that introduction, let me just turn it over to you, Dan, and you've done this before, so proceed as you wish.
Thank you, Evelyn. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so I would encourage you all, if you have any questions, I will stop at various points in my presentation, but please feel free to enter any questions in the chat. I have somebody who would be monitoring it for me. And because we're not the biggest group, I would say feel free to also just raise your hand and pose a question as well. I'm going to try and cover respond to three different questions. The first one is simply providing an update about actions taken by this current administration with regards to immigrants. And in particular, I'm going to start with refugees, but then I'm going to expand it because we have seen that the impacts have been on the immigrant community at large. The second area I would like to cover this evening is to provide some reliable sources of information such that you can keep up to date with what's happening. Things are happening so quickly that it's very difficult to keep abreast and keep informed. And so I will be sharing a couple resources that I've found to be very helpful myself and provide that to you. And then lastly, what is it that we're encouraging people to do in order to respond to what is happening? So I'll be sharing some ideas about what can be done to help in what's happening. So let me begin with just an update around refugees, because this community's primary focus is on refugees. I'm going to start there. When the president was elected and inaugurated on January the 20th, he issued an executive order which indefinitely suspended the U.S. refugee program. And then about 5 days later, his administration circulated a stop work order to all the resettlement agencies. Why that is important is because regardless of the fact that he may have suspended the program, there were the refugees that had arrived before the suspension of the program that are typically granted something we call the initial resettlement grant, which is a means by which the government assists individuals coming in the country for the first 30 to 90 days with things like rental cost, furnishing their apartments, utility costs, and other things in order to help them in their initial resettlement. And all of that was frozen as well. So if you had the bad chance of arriving anywhere around the suspension of the refugee program, you did not receive the full benefits that you would have otherwise have received. Then on February the 26th, about a month later, after the initial executive order, the administration actually informed the resettlement agencies that their cooperative agreements or their contracts with the U.S. government to provide resettlement services were being terminated. And then just recently, on March the 31st, the resettlement agencies received basically a notice of an intent to reinstate their corporate agreements, with the mention that even in reinstating it, they would immediately be terminated again. And I'll come back to that. That may seem a little strange, but I'll come back to why that was. So in the midst of all of this, there have been several attempts to litigate or to bring this before the courts. And in one of these court rulings called Pasito versus Trump, the administration, the Trump administration, was ordered to reinstate the resettlement contracts and to continue processing and resettling over 100,000 refugees who had already received conditional approval by a USCIS as of the January 20th deadline. Now, the question is, even though they were ordered by the court to do this, what has actually happened? And the answer to that is, apart from some very rare follow to join cases, the indefinite refugee ban and the funding freeze remains fully in effect. What the resettlement agencies have received is they have finally received reimbursement for expenses that they incurred prior to the freeze date. So they weren't even sure whether or not they would be reimbursed for expenses that they had had prior to the date that the refugee ban went into effect, but they have since been reimbursed for that expense. However, they were not provided additional resources to provide the refugees who had arrived around the date of the freeze with their initial resettlement grant or benefits that they should have typically received. In essence, I would say the administration has stonewalled the litigation or the court's order, while simultaneously preparing for the resettlement of white South Africans. I don't know if some of you have followed this, but the Trump administration had actually shortly, not so long after the initial executive order suspending the program in February, I believe, issued another executive order in which they said that they were going to offer to white South Africans resettlement through the U.S. resettlement program. Now, how you offer resettlement to a program that you've already suspended is still a mystery to many of us. But while we at first thought that this probably was not going to go anywhere, we have since learned that there is actually processing occurring right now. They are actually establishing a presence in South Africa to identify white South Africans that would be interested in coming to the United States. And the number we have seen so far is that there are 67,000 white South Africans that have expressed interest in being resettled to the United States. One other thing I'll just mention today, what has historically been one of the larger resettlement agencies, when I was in refugee resettlement with World Relief, they were the largest resettlement agency. I know that that has changed over the years, but they still remain a fairly significant size resettlement agencies, and that is the Catholic Church, or USCCB. They announced yesterday in a public statement that they will not be renewing their existing cooperative agreements with the federal government related to child services and refugee support. So the Catholic Church has basically said, enough is enough. We are not interested in renewing our cooperative agreements or our contracts with the federal government for resettlement and for child services purposes. Let me stop there. There's so much more I could say around the refugee program, but let me stop and just open it up. If anyone has any questions about anything I've said or anything else you may have heard around the U.S. refugee program. Yes, go ahead. Let me go with Courtney. Oh, they're muted.
No,
Unmute.
I asked, yeah, I will
Oh, there
unmute
we
you
go.
once.
Okay,
Yep,
there
Can
there
you
we
hear
go.
me now?
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
Okay. My name is David Arnold. My question is about the Catholic bishops. In the news account of their being suspended or terminated, there was a subtle phrase about the fact that good Christians or good Catholics could fill in the void financially for them. Is that possible? And is that what the Catholic bishops want?
Yes, it's a really good question. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is there were agencies in the United States, including the Catholics, that were assisting refugees coming to this country before we ever had an official resettlement program in 1980. If you recall, the resettlement program was actually established in 1980 by the Refugee Act. However, before that time, we had people being resettled in the United States, and agencies were already assisting them before there was ever an official US government refugee resettlement program. And you're absolutely correct. The statement was much longer than what I shared. And in it, they basically stated that they had been involved in assisting refugees and others coming to this country before the resettlement program. And they plan to continue assisting them, regardless of the fact that they will not be in a contract with the US government.
Thank you.
Yes, Evelyn. Oh, I'm sorry. I also see Kate has her hand up.
Hi, good evening. Kate Pongonis. I just retired from the State Department a year ago out of a tour in population refugees and migration. So my question is about, I know that Welcome Corps was canceled. I was a part of a private sponsorship group that was preparing to receive in January a Sudanese family of 6. Given that these refugees have been recognized, presumably by UNHCR and the US government, are there efforts to now resettle them in other countries, given that the US has canceled the refugee resettlement program?
Yeah, really good question. And Kate, thank you for your service. I have a lot of friends and worked really closely with the US State Department, especially PRM. Really appreciate what you guys do there. But in regards to your question, absolutely. I think UNHCR will be looking for other countries to resettle these individuals. Some of the larger other countries that do resettlement, Australia has a fairly large program. Canada has a fairly large program. Europe has started to has done some resettlement as well, especially some of the Scandinavian countries. So yes, because most of these people, even those that came to the United States, were initially recognized or granted resettlement or refugee status through UNHCR, they will continue looking for other countries to take them. Unfortunately, the U.S., the unfortunate part about this all is the U.S. has been one of the largest resettlement countries among all the resettlement countries in terms of sheer numbers. If you look at, percentage of their population and things like that, we could go into a different discussion. But in terms of just numbers, the U.S. has been one of the largest. And in fact, last year, with resettling a little over 100,000, that was just remarkable. We were hopeful that we might see some numbers similar to that, but clearly that is not going to happen. Yes,
Stan,
Evelyn.
I'm aware that refugees are still coming in. My assumption is that they are paying their own airfare to come in. Do you have any sense of the numbers that are coming in?
Yeah, so you're correct about that. I mentioned there are some cases of follow to join. When I say follow to join, most of the time these are family members that are trying to reunite with their family. And therefore, those people in the United States, the refugees that are applying for family members to follow to join them, will be probably attempting to help them through paying for their flights and things like that. The other program I haven't mentioned that was impacted by this suspension of the refugee program is the Afghan SIV, or Special Immigrant Visa Program. That program, there was never an executive order that suspended that program. That program is not a subset of the refugee program. I think a lot of times people think that program is a part of the refugee program. It is actually a separate program completely. And there have been Afghan SIVs who have also come into the United States that have been granted their SIV status. However, like the refugees, they are required to pay their own airfare. And like the refugees, once they arrive in this country, while in the past, they also were eligible for this initial resettlement program, they will not receive either reimbursement for their flight, or they will not receive any kind of initial resettlement grant. And so they're completely on their own once they arrive in this country. And our understanding is those individuals, why they do have authorization to come in, have been questioned at the airport. Fortunately, so far, our understanding is they have been permitted to enter, but that doesn't mean that entry has been that smooth. They have had to undergone some questioning, often at the port of entry, about their status and things like that. We are actively involved in asking that the administration and the Congress reinstate the resettlement program as the court has ordered, thus far with little, if any, success. And our request is also that the SIV program be fully reinstated, including granting them their flights and also this initial resettlement program. There are private parties and coalitions that are attempting their best to assist when asked for assistance, and making it known that they will attempt to assist individuals who already have SIV status or other refugee status. But that is all that being done through private parties. That has nothing to do with the government. Does anyone else have a question? Is there anything in the chat, or are we good?
Looks like we're good.
Yeah,
Okay.
just people are making comments about their experiences if everyone wants to read through the chat, but I think we're good, Dan, for you to keep going.
Fantastic. So I've been asked to try and cover a little more than just refugees, because many of you probably are well aware that so many other people, immigrants, have also been impacted over the last 2 months or so. Let me begin with asylum seekers and parolees. These two groups have also been faced a lot of challenges. First of all, in terms of the parolees, just today, DHS announced that they were revoking parole for hundreds of thousands. And when I say hundreds of thousands, it's about 900,000 parolees that were allowed to enter into the United States via the CBP1 app. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but during the Biden administration, there was an application that individuals, immigrants, could apply to, primarily immigrants who were seeking asylum in the United States. They could do so through this app in order to control the number of people who were just showing up on the border. Instead, they would apply through this app. About 900,000 people were permitted to enter the United States. Well, DHS is now revoking their parole and asking that they prepare to immediately self-deport. Second of all, some of you may be familiar with the parolees. It was called the CHNV program. Basically, that program was for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. And that program has also been put on hold. They had all also received parole status, and that parole status has been revoked and will come to a complete end as of April the 24th. There have also been reports that for those who have had parole, but who had applied for asylum, so parole is only a temporary status. It doesn't grant you any kind of permanent status in the United States. Most people on parole, because many of these people through the CBP1 app came in on the premise that they had an asylum claim. Well, those individuals who are pursuing asylum, regardless of where their asylum application is, basically our understanding is that they've been told to no longer process the asylum claims of anybody who entered this country on parole. So, in other words, while they may be attempting to legally enter and they actually have a standing application in for asylum, the Trump administration has asked that USCIS not complete their application and not grant them asylum. Now, the other thing we've also learned is there are reports that people with pending asylum applications in the United States have been arrested and deported. That is, again, contrary to the law. The law says, and this is a special case for asylum seekers in the United States. This isn't true for other types of immigration status, but for asylum, if you have a pending application into the US government for asylum in the United States, you are protected from deportation until you have the ability and the calendar is such that you can actually present your case before a judge. But this administration is not honoring that law. It is instead choosing to even deport those who have standing applications for asylum. Any other questions?
Nothing in the chat. Anybody else have a question for Dan at this point?
I do. What is there international recourse with the US not following the asylum rules? Or is this totally within the United States jurisdiction?
Well, I mean, the answer to that is the UN and UNHCR could say that the United States is breaking its the convention, which it is, the Refugee Convention. The question is if whether or not the UN and UNHCR are ready or prepared to face the consequences of making a public declaration about how the United States is not honoring something that they have signed. So I think eventually we may see UNHCR or the UN come out about the treatment of asylum seekers and refugees within the United States, but I don't know how quickly they will be in responding. The bottom line here is actually some of those laws that are being broken are US law, which means that actually the US courts can take these cases up and can pursue them. Unfortunately, thus far, our experience in the courts have been that the administration is not adhering to the orders that the courts are issuing. And the courts are somewhat at a loss to know exactly what to do at this juncture, because it would create what is known as a constitutional crisis. And in other words, it's a crisis because at this juncture, you have the judiciary system of the United States up against the executive branch of the United States. And that would constitute a constitutional crisis.
Dan, before we go on, Cindy has some questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I wanted to go back to something you just mentioned about the pending asylum cases. Is that for all parolees or just those who came in through the CHNV?
It's not for all parolees. It's for any parolee for whom their parole has been revoked. So far, that would be all the Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. And it would also be anyone who came in on the CBP1 app. So those two groups have had their parole revoked. Now, what we are aware of is that Ukrainians have been threatened with having their parole revoked as well. In fact, over the weekend, some Ukrainians had received notice that their parole had been revoked and they should self-deport or should deport. That was an erroneous message that was sent. It was a message that had been sent, actually did come out from the government, but was not sanctioned. In other words, it was prematurely released, and therefore it has since, the government has since said, basically, please ignore that. It was sent prematurely. But the fact that it went out would suggest that the bottom line is that they are going to at some point revoke Ukrainian parole as well. And we anticipate that Afghan parole may be revoked, but it certainly will not be renewed. So for the Afghans who came into the country on parole, there's an open-ended question as to whether or not they're actually revoked their parole or if they just simply will not renew the parole. As you may recall, parole for the Afghans was for 2 years. That expired because we're now well beyond that 2-year point. They were allowed to have, they were allowed to renew their parole for another 2 years, but that parole will again shortly come up. And what we do understand is that they will not permit them to re-parole.
Okay, so someone who's waiting for asylum approval who came in as an Afghan parolee, they should, what can you suggest what they should do? Should they follow up with their congressperson?
Yes, yes. I would immediately contact both senators and your district representative immediately. And I would ask for the caseworker, and I would ask that they all, engage USCIS and ask that their case be expedited as quickly as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then to go back to earlier in the talk, you mentioned the follow to join. Are those the I-730 applications? Okay.
Yes, in the most part, my understanding for the most part, those are family ties often submitted for family members to join.
Yes, there seems to be some kind of a timeline online. Is it following that timeline?
What we have seen so far is that even among the follow to join, we've only seen rare exceptions actually making their way to the United States. That's a pretty large group of individuals, and we have not seen that many. Like I said, it's the rare exception we have seen get through. So a lot of them, I'm afraid at this juncture, aren't having a lot of success in trying to get here.
Okay, that's interesting. I follow the Afghan community very closely just because I've been working with them for several years now. And I'm hearing folks saying that, parents of minors are coming, brothers are coming. So I don't know who was contacting husbands here about the wives who are still in Afghanistan. I think CARE has been disbanded. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I can say something about CARE. It's been dismantled. It's still existent, but it's a skeleton of what it was. So it is, I guess, for most intensive purposes, pretty much so diminished that it really struggles in doing much of anything. This is one of our other asks, that CARE be fully re-established and that it be permitted to continue its existence at least for another year, preferably for a couple years.
Okay. One last question. I know you haven't touched on this topic yet, but I help one family from South Sudan. They're refugees. Is their visa canceled or
Yeah,
is that a different group?
no, I would say their visa isn't canceled. The program has simply been suspended, and it's very unlikely that it will be reinstated. The question being for that group is whether or not they've already received refugee status and are part of this group of about 100,000 who have already conditional approval from the US government. If they have conditional approval, there may be a possibility they could still come. But if they were early in the process and they had yet to receive US conditional approval, it's very unlikely that they will come to the United States, at least in the near future.
Okay, they're actually here already, so are they affected by that ruling? They don't yet have a green card.
They're already here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
I think that as of right now, they should be fine. But I hate to even venture that because there's so much that has happened that we thought would never happen. That I would hope that that they will not touch anybody who's arrived through the U.S. refugee program and attempt to send them back. These are individuals that have a fear of persecution from their countries of origin. Sending them back would be criminal. So, I mean, I don't foresee that happening if they're already in the U.S. What I do see happening, though, is unfortunately those individuals don't have access to many of the programs that they would have had access to prior to the suspension of the refuge program, and therefore are pretty much on their own in terms of integration and resettlement in the U.S.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Who was next?
Nancy was next, and then Elena, and then maybe we have your final part, and then we can do last questions after that. So Nancy, go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in regards to the human rights, the UN Human Rights Council, this year is a review of human rights in the United States. It's the Universal Periodic Review by the UN Human Rights Commissioner and Human Rights Council, and it's happening in November, and the date just past the 7th, where you had, if you wanted to send in a stakeholder report, you could. This group, it would have been great to have you do that. I think I didn't explain enough to all the groups. I did send in a report for our local UNA chapter and some other groups, and we did touch on the human rights issues that we had questions of our government and we had recommendations. So we tried to keep it positive instead of negative, but we have a lot of questions. So
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very encouraging.
yeah, so there will be rapporteurs here, and it will be going on. So
well, I hope they are very straightforward with the U.S. government about what they find. So
I think they will be. Actually, the person in charge said he expected to see 500 recommendations for our government.
fantastic. Elena?
Hi, everyone. I work at a local refugee resettlement agency in San Diego, an affiliate of HIAS, and I just wanted to I'll expand on what you had mentioned about the parolees getting notices of termination. We have had clients who are Cuban and Haitian receive notices of termination, and recently Afghans as well, if they did enter under the OAW. This is something that's just happening very quickly. There's not much information. As Dan mentioned, there's just so many organizations that have either been skeletal shells now that have no staff responding. So I'm going to upload a sample letter just so that people in the community know what these letters look like. What we're recommending is anyone who gets this letter go immediately to their attorney. And I also dropped a link of how to connect with your local state representative through welcome.us. There's a lot of people doing good work, but there's a lot of people needing assistance. So if there's anyone that I know a big need right now in the community is interpretation. So if there's anything out there that you know someone that speaks a language, I believe a lot of the undocumented minors programs have lost funding. That's also a huge need as well. So I'm just going to drop that file so you guys can look at it, know what it looks like. There's a lot of people, needing support and more information that we can get out, the better. And I'd like to offer myself as a resource as well. I sit on the State Advisory Council for Refugee Services with CDSS, and we meet quarterly as well. That is a public meeting in June. If any of you would like to attend and see what California is doing in terms of their response with their social services as well.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate your offering up as a resource. I would certainly take you up on it, and I would encourage others to take you up as well. Somebody working firsthand with one of the resettlement agencies has firsthand experience, and so really welcome any information you'd like to share or resources, and appreciate everything that you're doing in behalf of those who certainly right now are really struggling. So
Yes,
let me turn.
Connect.
Okay, I could go on with the undocumented population, with even green card holders. What we are seeing is well beyond what this administration said they were going to do. But what I'd like to do with the time remaining is turn to the second thing I wanted to do, which is simply share with you some resources where you can find up-to-date information about what's happening so you can stay informed. I will be sharing this with Evelyn. I will provide her with links to all of this. So in any follow-up communication, you can go directly. I'll have a link in there that I'll provide to her that you can go to, but I'll just put some out there right now. We at the National Immigration Forum, we have two resources in particular that I would bring your attention to. The first one is called A Forum Daily. This is something that we put out every day, and basically it captures any kind of media information that is come out in that particular day. So often it comes out around noon, and it basically summarizes media articles that are on immigration, maybe refugees, and maybe anything around immigration. And this comes out on a daily basis. And then the second thing I'm going to highlight is something that we call the Legislative Bulletin. It comes out once a week. It comes out on Friday, again, often around noon or shortly thereafter. And this particular bulletin goes into far greater depth on issues that are being engaged at Congress level. It also has a list of bills that are being introduced around immigration, and it addresses various issues that have come out throughout the week, and does so in a bit more detail in a paragraph or two, providing greater detail about the particular issue. So I would certainly encourage you, if you go to our website and you just Google the National Immigration Forum, and then if you scroll all the way down to the bottom in what I would call the footnote area, there's a thing that says stay connected. And if you click on that, there's a sign-up form, and on the form you can click if you want to have the daily, or if you want the legislative bulletin, or if you want both, or everything that we have available. You can just click on it, and you'll get this automatically in your email every day, or whenever it comes out. So the daily every day, and then the legislative bulletin on the weekend. Apart from our resources, there are many others that are producing excellent materials. There's something called the Impact Project. This is not just about immigration. This Impact Project has created an impact map on which they are recording every federal program throughout the United States that is being impacted by the activities of this administration, either by the cutbacks by DOGE. So it covers every sector from defense to housing to energy in a color-coded fashion and in a very detailed fashion. So for every state in the union and every program within that state that has some type of federal funding. So that may be of interest to you if you have something interest far beyond just immigrants or refugees. And then Church World Service has something they call the State of Play, and I will provide a link for that. This is a daily update about what's happening in the refugee program, including updates around litigation that's happening around the refugee program. So I will provide a link to Evelyn as well for that particular resource. But these are resources that I myself use. I find them extremely helpful. So I would encourage you, if you have an interest in any of these things, that you subscribe to them or you just sign up for them and they'll end up in your email box. Any questions around that?
Dan, I've been using a lot of your resources from the daily, and I've actually posted about the Impact Project and CWS and all that. So thank you. I've been sharing a lot of that on our social media.
Yeah, those sources are just, they're exceptional. And in light of what's happening, it's almost impossible. I mean, I just today alone, there were probably 2 things that were brand new that came out. And so we're seeing almost every day, multiple events. It's impossible to keep up apart from having some kind of resource if you're really interested in keeping up. Let me go to my last thing. I realize time is, let me just answer the question about how you can be helpful. This has come up several times already, and I therefore would like to just highlight it, and that is, please engage your senators and your representatives. I mean, first of all, I would say, send them an email, send them a letter. I mean, you don't have to do formal letters anymore. Emails are, you can just drop a message via email to your senators and your representatives. Please do that. I mean, the other thing is meetings with your senator and representatives. I mean, they really like to hear from their constituents. So all you need to do is simply ask for a meeting, tell them when you're available. And I would encourage you, if you don't hear back from them shortly, the same day, that you continue to email them the following day and the following week. Say, hey, if last week didn't work, how about this week? I have to do the same. I will assure you, it's not often that I get a response on my first email. You're going to have to pursue it. If you want a meeting, you're going to have to ask for it a couple of times probably, but ask for a meeting and share with them your concerns. I would also say, consider inviting your member, especially your representative, to participate in local events in your own community, attend a town hall meeting, and come with questions to ask your members of Congress. There are things called call to actions or call to action campaigns. Most every agency has them. The National Immigration Forum does. If you go again to our website, you go to the homepage and you scroll down, you'll come to a thing that says action campaigns or key campaigns. And if you click on any one of them, they'll take you to a whole list of actions that we're asking people to participate in. And every one of the actions has a take action button. All you need to do is click on the take action button, and it will walk you through what you need, what you can do in order to take action on that particular issue. So again, I will share this with Evelyn, but if you go to our website, you'll find this. We're continuously adding new campaigns or renewing old ones. So that is another thing. If you have a particular area that you're interested in and want to take action, please. For us, our focus is primarily on anything related to immigration, not just refugees. So you'll find quite a broad a possibility of areas to engage. In regards to the question about, is anything happening in Congress? There is still talk about some, what I would call more restrictive immigration bills, but we are beginning to see the possibility that if, in fact, the government gets all the money it's asking for border security, and in light of the fact that the border numbers are at an all-time low, that there may be room for some immigration reform. Most likely that reform could be one of the areas that we think we could see it is in the agriculture sector. The other area is the Afghans and Afghan adjustment. We think that's still a possibility. The issue, of course, being that most likely it will be linked to some other bills or some other actions that we aren't as supportive of. But nevertheless, if we could get some positive immigration on some particular critical areas, that would be really helpful. There are a number of other things. You can write op-eds for your local or city papers. You can give to immigration groups that are working directly with immigrants. You can set up meetings with immigrants just in order to hear what they're having to say about their current experience. There are growing number of Know Your Rights campaigns going on. And I think it's important for you to know as well what the rights of immigrants are so that you can assist them. And then I would offer, I believe that we may already be in a point where we have to find ways to protect our immigrants against some of the illegal activities that are currently happening. That enters into a whole nother area, perhaps a little bit more challenging. But I would also encourage any of your networks, be that colleges, be that places of worship, be that any kind of public group, that they begin to think about, learn about, and engage around this issue. Because what we're seeing is some of the things that are being done toward immigrants, there is not a long distance between immigrants and US citizens. In fact, this government has already said that they would like to see US citizens end up in El Salvador in this basically high security prison. That is a scary thought, but not outside the realm of possibility in light of what they're already doing illegally toward immigrants. So let me stop there and see if there are any other questions.
Stunned silence.
Phenomenal, Dan. Phenomenal.
Yeah, and I could go on for hours on this. I guess the one thing I will end on is I believe we're already in a constitutional crisis. What I see being done to immigrants at large in this country is beyond legal. It's also beyond moral. It's cruel. It's inhumane. It's dehumanizing. And I will be honest with you. I never expected to see this. You know, I've worked internationally, not just as a Peace Corps volunteer, but as I work with a mission organization overseas. I was born overseas to missionary families. I've experienced the whole spectrum of governance, and I never imagined. I often bragged about America. I must say, what I bragged about, I'm now seeing what I couldn't have ever imagined seeing in the United States.
I think many of us feel the same way.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, it is absolutely shocking. We knew it was going to be bad. We thought it would stay within the realm of legal. We quickly have gone beyond that, and we're quickly far beyond individuals who have criminal convictions. We're now talking about students who are having their visas revoked. We are talking about individuals being picked up by plainclothes individuals off the street. I mean, you would think we're in Russia or who knows where. It's inconceivable. But I thank you all for your attention. And I will certainly pass on some of the resources I mentioned so that if you're interested, you can stay abreast of everything that's happening.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. And we will continue to work on this, and we will engage with you. The question really is, what this community can do throughout the country. And we're trying to mobilize this broader community, but there's a hardcore group that's been participating in a lot of these meetings. So maybe we can think of a way of reaching out as well.
Well, I think what will happen, Evelyn, as some of these things that are currently being done toward immigrants begins to bleed over into U.S. citizens and green card holders, I think people are going to begin to recognize that this isn't going to be limited. The retaliatory actions being taken by this administration against some people who resist them, even if they're U.S. citizens, is frightening. So,
yeah. Well, on that happy note, I thank you so much for talking with us, and hopefully we'll figure out a way to take action individually and together. And we will pursue that. So thanks again, Dan. And as this has been recorded, and it will be posted on our website in a couple of days. And we'll also make all of the links that Dan was talking about available on our website. So thank you. Thank all of you who joined us, and especially to Dan. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Dan. Thank you,
And
Evelyn,
Ann, and
and
all of you.
everyone.
Night.
Very informative.